Welcome everybody back to part 2. In this video, we are going to finish building that table, and then we're going to build a bar graph. And if we have time, we will start working on our line graphs. So here is where we left off. I'm currently logged into my Tableau public page. I'm on my little hidden tab, and then here is my work. So there's two ways that we can re-access it to start working with it again. You could click on this, go over here to download and download it as a Tableau workbook. I kind of find that cumbersome though, because then you have to go to the website, download it every time, and I don't know, I just don't like that. So instead, what I recommend you do is open up a new Tableau workbook. And look right here, it has your most recent version. If I click on that, voila, it knows exactly what I want. If you're not signed into Tableau Public, it might ask you to re-sign in, but it'll take you back to your most recent work, which is just, again, Tableau's just like magic. Okay, here we are back with our table. There's a few features that I want to show you, common changes that I like to make. So the first is, I'm a little picky. I'm a little finicky. I find that I like to reduce as much unnecessary words and colors as possible just to make things easier to read. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on donut type. I'm going to hide the field label because I kind of think it's redundant. I think people get what's going on if they say Krispy Kreme Dunkin' Top Hot Chocolate Glaze Old Fashioned, right? So that just makes it a little quicker and easier to read. Another thing is, this is actually technically a currency. So I want to change this from just a basic number to have a US dollar sign in front of it. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to come over to this sum of sales in the marks card. Oh, you know what? I didn't talk about this. Okay. Yeah. Before I do that, let me talk about sum of sales. So you probably noticed last time, and maybe, figured it out, that when we double clicked sales and it was added to the table, this sum was added, right? Because over here it's not there, but over here it is. And that's because Tableau knows that this is a quantitative variable, and it knows that you basically want to aggregate the total sales for these donuts and for these companies. So basically what Tableau is currently doing is it took the sales variable and it said, I'm going to add the total sales for Dunkin' Donuts, chocolate donuts. Boom, there it is. Then for glazed, then for old fashioned. And it does that for each company. It does it automatically too, which is so awesome, because if I were to if I just wanted to know the overall sales for every company, I could unclick, I could basically get rid of the donut type, and then boom, Tableau automatically recalculates that value, because it's just looking at what do you have in your canvas, and it applies this aggregation. Okay, I'm going to Control Z. I could do the same for donut type. If I really quickly wanted to understand, out of all these three companies, how many dollars were spent buying chocolate donuts versus glazed and old fashioned, I could do that really quickly. So that's what this sum of sales accomplishes. And that's why it's really important to make sure your data types are labeled correctly if you want to perform math on them or if you want to categorize them. Okay, that was a side note. Sorry that I didn't touch that in part 1. I realized part 1 was really long, so we pushed it to this part. Okay, so we're changing the values from just integers to a currency. In order to do that, there's two different ways. We're going to do it this way. You're going to click on that downward arrow in sum of sales, and you're going to click on format. Over here in our default window, we have numbers. We're going to click on that. And look, we have currency. Whoa, that's so cool. But like I mentioned before, I really hate redundancy. So we're going to get rid of the cents because it just doesn't apply. So I'm actually going to click currency custom. And then I'm going to change the decimal places to 0. Now, if I wanted, I could also change the display units, because as you can see, after the hundreds, or in the hundreds place, they're all zeros. So if I wanted to get rid of those zeros, I could by making this, by making the units within the thousands. I'm not going to do that, but if you like the aesthetic, feel free to, implement that. You could even go as far as millions, honestly, because they're all within that range. So if you really wanted to, keep it there, you could go back to, oopsies, there we go. You could keep the decimal places to 2, and you could change it to millions. So now that you have a little more detail. Okay. For me and for this purpose, I'm just going to keep it at its like normal values. I'm not going to have unique display units. That's how you can sort of play around with how your number is basically displayed, and how you can change it to a currency. The second thing I'm going to do is sometimes having this, it's called a row band. So you can see, it's kind of tough to see. It's a very light gray, but you can see that between Dunkin' Donuts and Top Pot, Krispy Kreme is almost highlighted in gray. Sometimes that can be useful if you have a lot of different rows. And it can help visually with the eye to just see that distinguishing difference. For us, since we only have 3 rows and we only have 4 columns, again, it's just sort of like this visual noise that I like to get rid of. So if you want to get rid of row banding, you have to hover over your table, right click, and then choose format. It's kind of tricky to find. It always takes me a while to actually navigate to it. But you go ahead and click on shading. And then over here, it says row banding. And you're going to change both the pane and the header to none. And voila. See, it's just, these tiny little details make so much of a difference visually. I think it's really helpful. So the last thing we're going to do is just label this correctly. So currently what's happening up here at the title is the title of the table is going to be based on just whatever we put in the sheet name. But my title is going to be kind of long. So it's not like I want to put down here in my sheet name, overall sales for each donut, that's too long. So what we're going to do is first, let's change our sheet name to just table, and notice up here that it changed. Then I'm going to double click on my chart title. I'm going to delete this sheet name code, and then I'm going to put in my title. So for me, I'm going to put overall company sales by donut. And voila, there you go. We have our first ever highly polished table. We will make changes to it later when we create the dashboard, but this is at a pretty good stopping point. So we've done the table. Now we have to create a new sheet to create a bar graph. So we're going to do that. In the lower left-hand side of your screen, you're going to click new worksheet. I'm just going to already double click and change the name to bar graph because that's what I know I'm going to build. For this bar graph, I am now interested in just what the overall sales are for every donut type. I'm curious to know which donut type is the most popular, had the most sales. So we come back to our sidebar. We're going to hover over our first pill, which is donut type, and double click. Then we're going to do the same for sales. Okay, but I want to make a bar graph because we already have a table. And I just really quickly want people to recognize basically which donut has the most sales and which one doesn't. If we leave it in this table format, you have to read through each number, which takes a little bit of time in order to figure that out quickly. But if I made this into a bar graph by clicking on Show Me and clicking on that highlighted recommended bar icon, and then unclick Show Me, I can instantly see Old Fashioned is the king of donuts. And then there's chocolate and glazed, right? So just by changing your data into different types of charts and graphs, you can get a better sense at what chart is going to display this information in the best way possible, right? So that people can very quickly and easily understand what's going on. There's a couple things I don't love about this. The first is that it's really small. So up here, I'm going to click on where it says standard. And I'm going to change that to entire view. And instantly it fills the entire canvas. So it makes it a lot bigger. But it feels like a little too chunky for me. So I'm actually going to come over to the marks card and click on size. And I'm going to change the size, which is going to be the width of this bar chart. That's a little bit better. Next, I want the donut that sells the most donuts to be at the top and the donut that sells the least to be at the bottom. Okay, so I want to sort my data in descending order. To do that very quickly, I can come up here to the top of my screen and you see these two, they almost look like bar charts, right? This one is ascending. So this is going to put the glazed donut, which has the smallest amount of sales, at the top. And this one is descending. So it switches it. And that's the one that I want. Now, again, almost instantaneously, if I were to show this to somebody and say, hey, which donut had the most sales? They'd be like, old fashioned. And that's kind of what I'm going for, right? I want to make interpreting this data and figuring out the patterns and trends as easy as possible. Okay. So there you have it. You have built your very first bar graph and you've also learned how to sort it. Okay. We're going to also clean it up a little bit, just like we did with our table. So I'm going to get rid of this field label, the donut type, because again, I find it to be redundant. I'm going to also rename it from bar graph, which is just the sheet name, to overall sales by donut type. Okay. And there you have it. We have our first ever bar graph, right? Tableau makes it really easy. It's just looking at what pills are in the canvas and it recommends what visualization would be the best to display that data. Okay. Then you can sort it really easily, rearrange it, and we're good to go. Now there's one other thing that I'm going to show you how to do with this bar graph. And that's something that I find myself actually doing quite often. So one thing about a bar graph is it's a great way to quickly understand basically who's at the top and who's at the bottom. But if I was actually interested in also knowing the total sales for these donut types, I would have to, as an audience member, I'd have to come over here and be like, okay, old fashioned is just above this line, which, is right here. Okay. And then, you kind of have to do some puzzling. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm actually going to create a label so that people can very quickly understand, okay, yes, old fashioned's at the top and this is how much it's sold. And that label is going to be the value of my sales. So I'm going to click and drag sales to label and look at that. Tableau knows exactly what I want to do, right? This is 11.6 million, 11 million, 10.5 million. Amazing. Sweet. So it's added the labels to each bar graph. So now individuals who are looking at this can very quickly say, old fashioned's at the top and this is how much money it made, basically. I'm also going to show you how to modify it. So if you don't like having the label at the very end, you can come over here to your marks card and click on label. Here is where you can change the text type. You can also change the font, which we're probably going to do, and the alignment. That's what we're going to click on right now. So it automatically puts the label outside of the bar, but I'm going to be fancy. I'm going to put it inside of the bar, which makes me happy. It's also kind of small. So I'm going to come to the font. I'm going to make it bold so you can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to change this to a size 12. Sweet. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is, I like currency. So I'm going to change the sum of sales from a number format over here to that currency custom. And in this case, I'm going to use the millions. So I'm going to change the display unit to million and leave 2 decimal points. And there you have it. Again, immediately we can see old fashioned's at the top and you can also see the value. Now you notice when I hover over this bar chart, a tooltip pops up, right? You see that white box that says donut type, old fashioned, and sales. That's what this is in your marks card, this tooltip. Okay, it's basically, it helps you see exactly what data type you're looking at based on where your mouse is. And that comes in handy a lot of times when you have a lot of, let's say, like line charts. I'm trying to think of other scenarios for tooltips. There's a lot of different great use cases for a tooltip. But in this case, it is redundant because we already have all the information we need very visibly. So I'm going to turn off the tooltip. In order to do that, I click on tooltip in the marks card and I uncheck this box right here where it says show tooltips. And then I click OK. Ooh, so cool. And you know what? I think I actually want to do that for table as well, because if I hover over here, again, it's only showing data that is already pretty easy to see. So it's redundant. So I'm going to go back to tooltip and I'm going to uncheck the box and hit OK. Alrighty, so we have made our table and our bar graph, and I'm just going to end the video here. So next video, we will go over how to create a line graph. Now, please do not forget to save your work. So go ahead right now and click on File, Save to Tableau Public. Okay? If you haven't signed in, then, sign in again. And this is basically going to overwrite the old version that you had, but double check and make sure that it's still hidden. Okay? And mine is, and now I'm seeing my bar graph. And if you can't see your other table, do not fear, it still exists, I promise you. So when you open this up in part 3, you'll be able to still access your table. But this is just kind of like the limitations of using Tableau Public. Okay, great work. I'll see you in part 3.